Hello, Jonas. Thank you so much for taking the time to join the internal communication series, spotlight series that I run on my blog and on my YouTube channel. So I'm very delighted to have you on the show. I speak to leaders from around the globe, talking to them about different aspects of internal communications. And I know that you are a strong advocate of digital technologies at the workplace. So thought I should speak to you. So, before we get started, it'll be great if you could quickly introduce yourself for our viewers.
Yes, and thank you for inviting me. It's an honor to share some of my ideas, at least in your show. So I hope it's going to be fun, and I know it's going to be fun. So that's going to be great. So a bit about me: I've been working with internal comms for like 15 years now, and mainly focused around always on digital channels. Started out with you could say, intranets, and then it developed into internal social media 10 years ago, and then a lot of other channels and so on. So yeah, it's always been my passion.
Great. And so according to you, what makes digital technologies crucial for internal communications? And like you mentioned, in the past there were intranets, and now there are social intranets. So it's obviously evolving. So what makes them so crucial?
Yeah, so I mean, it depends on how you look at it, right? So if you're an internal communicator, it's really crucial for you to reach people with digital technologies. Right. That's something we always dream of, right? Reaching everyone in organizations. But I think it's also a great opportunity to engage people, but also to connect people. And I think, in the end, it's about creating impact. So that is why I think that digital technology today is important. And I mean, we are still in a pandemic. So I mean, that's also where digital has proven its worth. So I don't think we can live without it anymore.
Right.
I know. So,
absolutely. Yeah. Great. And so today I think organizations and communicators are spoiled for choice because there are so many channels, so many platforms, so many apps. So how do they make sense of all of this? How do you know what is the right solution?
Yeah, it's a good question, actually. I think if we go 15 years back in time when I started in internal comms, I would say we had like one or two channels, basically, in internal comms, which was the intranet, and then we had the newspaper, maybe.
Right.
And now we don't have the newspaper anymore, but we have a lot of other channels we can work with. And I think now it's a different situation, right? Because we come from a time where one size had to fit everybody, and that was the way we worked. Now we actually have the opportunity to choose between a lot of different channels, and I think our challenge is not much different than for people who work in external comms or marketing or whatever. I mean, if you have these channels available, you have just have a big opportunity to create more impact. So that's the first thing I would say. Then we have the challenge if people actually understand what kind of channels they can use for what, right? So that's also the confusion that exists in organizations, is that they have so many channels available now. So I have to work. So do I also have to spend my time in choosing or figuring out where the news are and so on, right? That's our challenge, to design that in a good way. But I think in the end, it's about figuring out how do we create the best impact, and what is it that fits into the listeners or to our colleagues in the everyday work. So, for instance, a podcast might work very well for salespeople who are out driving. And an intranet article might work well for people who are sitting in the office, to make it very, very simple. But then also there are people who like to read, some people like to listen, other people like to view videos. So there are also different ways of consuming things that we can actually now service in a better way.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I think that's valid. And related to that, so then how do internal communicators, become better in understanding the value of these digital channels? What should they be doing differently?
Yeah, what should we do differently? I think very often we find ourselves being too focused on, for instance, producing output and reaching people. So producing an article or podcast or video or whatever we have, and when that's done, we look at the vanity metrics. Do people actually watch it? Do they see it, and so on? I would really like us to change our focus on the conversation on something different. I mean, obviously we have to reach people, otherwise there's nothing else to talk about, right? But we also have to look at how do we engage people? How do we engage with the content or with each other based on what we can offer? So that I think that is really interesting to look at, view it in that way, and then also try to connect it with the outcomes, the business outcomes. So, what is it that we're actually doing, and how does it actually affect the business outcomes? What impact does it have to the business? I think that's really interesting to see, and then we can actually end up producing podcasts for the HR team who are working with onboarding, for instance, or whatever makes sense, right? Because then we can link our communication efforts to something that really delivers some business value.
Got it. Makes sense. So you call yourself a tech-savvy humanist, and so I just want to understand, because of the pandemic, there's been a lot more focus on online and digital, and less on the human aspect. So how do we balance this from a communicator standpoint?
Yeah, I think if we just look at the last 2 years we've been through in the pandemic, I think digital also really showed and proved that we can actually be sometimes even more human when we are connected digitally, right? So, for instance, Teams meetings sometimes might have been experienced of been actually more human than a meeting in the meeting room at the office, right? Where you see people in the living rooms, or me right now sitting in my kids' rooms and so on. So that is actually there was a new human dimension that suddenly came up. But I think basically, if we look at the channels we have available now, they also offer some opportunities to become more human and to connect more with people. But I think it also requires from us internal comms people to try to step aside and look at how can we facilitate conversations, for instance, on social media, internal social media, for instance. That could be an opportunity for us to actually engage people by helping them connect with each other. Who there might be a lot of people who might be working in the same organizations, just far away from each other, who actually would benefit from connecting with each other and talk with each other and share ideas. And suddenly innovation becomes a topic for us, right? So how can we actually connect people so that they share ideas and become more innovative and so on? And I think that's really a great opportunity that we might have. But it actually the challenge for us is to understand how internal social media then works and how we can use that in a strategic way. And that is something I don't see very often in organizations right now. Very often it's just, switched on, and then people can use it, and then let's see how it goes, right? And that's it. And I think there's a really, really good opportunity there. Also, I mean, I talk a lot about podcasts because I actually quite like that. And that is also an opportunity for people to engage with each other in a new way. So, for instance, imagine the podcast you might listen to, and other. I think we all have this feeling that we connect with the host in the podcast show, or whoever it might be, in a different way than if we would just read an article or the guest in the podcast show, whatever it is, right? So we connect. But there's a deeper kind of connection when we do this podcast thing. So there are some opportunities to do something in a different way and more human in the future.
Fantastic. And you work with various clients on and advise them on internal communication. So what are some of the best practices that you're seeing related to digital communications?
Oh, there's a lot, I think. I think the best results. Let's start with how the best results they actually happen. I think that is when people just go out and try out stuff and see what happens, and then evaluate and on the fly. That's where I have seen some great examples of where things suddenly become really, really engaging and so on, and funny and whatever. And it doesn't always have to come from the internal comms side.
Right.
It could come from the organization. We just have to amplify it, right? But I think a good example that I've seen in Denmark from a mobile company was actually where they managed to combine a lot of things into one mobile app. And they connected, you could say, they connected the output from internal comms to certain business outcomes. And the way they did that was to say, okay, what do the sales people in the stores actually need to know? And one of the challenges was that these salespeople, they were, they are only in the business or in the stores for they only work there for 10 or 12 months or so on, because they are young people and they are used as a step. And they need information fast. And they knew that if they could give them the information they needed faster in a more engaging way, they might actually end up the salespeople might actually end up just delivering a better customer experience, and in the end sell more phones and so on. So they actually had this app where they send out messages from the CEO on a frequent basis. They send out quizzes where people could answer questions about the latest Samsung telephone or whatever it was, and if they answered some of the questions in a wrong way, they might actually end up receive a new training video about the things that they didn't know anything about. And I think that was a great example of how you actually combine learning with internal communications and so on. That really had an impact, and they could actually prove that it had an impact afterwards. And I think that is one of the interesting things. And I think also it's interesting because digital technologies, they don't care about silos, so they don't care about internal comms, HR comms, or learning and so on. Everything is just going into one, and we just have to figure out how do we manage that in a good way. So I also think about another good case. It's not really a case from a company, but we can see if you look at SharePoint today, or if you look at SMART and other vendors, is that they are trying to merge internal and external into one. So you can create feeds from external into your internal intranet.
Got it.
You can create feeds where you can follow pages, people, and so on, and then combine that into one feed with the internal use and external use and so on. And that is just coming up, and I think that is a new challenge. Challenge. That we have to deal with that as well. Maybe that is actually a huge opportunity, because we can then create a feed that's much more relevant for our colleagues. Actually, they don't have to just have to go one place, right?
Perfect. Yeah, I think these are great examples. And as we wrap up, so I want to ask you from a leadership standpoint. I mean, a lot of leaders are hesitant to use digital communication because they're not comfortable, and probably they are from the older generation. And of course, the younger leaders are more comfortable. So how do you help them break this mindset and get more accessible to this?
Yeah. So I think the first thing you should do as a leader, and not even a leader, I mean also as an internal comms people, is just to be curious. If you have kids, look at what your kids are doing. Be curious, talk to them, and watch some of their YouTube videos, what they and how they consume, and then also try things out. I mean, that is, in the end, the question also for a leader is, do you want to stay in your comfort zone, or do you actually want to be heard, right? And sometimes you need to get out of your comfort zone to be heard, because otherwise people just don't want to listen. They don't want to listen to your 10-minute video or 5-minute article about the latest strategy and so on. You have to figure out, how do you get attention today? I have a good example, if I can share that, from my vacation, where my youngest son, he came into me, I think late in the evening, and he really insisted that I had to watch this video from Mr. Beast. I don't know if anyone knows Mr. Beast, but he's a very famous YouTuber who's doing a lot of interesting stuff. And this video was about how Mr. Beast helped clean beaches, the dirtiest beach in the world, basically it was.
Right.
And we watched this video, and then I just, it had millions and millions of views, and I really suddenly really saw how the video format has changed over time, and how I actually had neglected that. And I'm not saying that everybody in internal comms should create Mr. Beast videos, but if you look at the way he's producing them with visuals, very short clips all the time, and there's no kind of no waste of time anymore. And if you try to run that Mr. Beast videos to a corporate video, you will instantly see how boring corporate videos they are today. So if you want to have attention and then compare it to Mr. Beast, I mean, we have to step up on that. We have to work with more visuals. We have to figure out how can we make these things more engaging, and that's just a way to say, okay, let's see what's out there, and then consider how can we use that internally. Another example is I just stumbled upon some what was that, Office 365 tips on TikTok. So instead of another example of how we sometimes produce dreadful tutorials with 5, 10, 15 minutes long internally, and here you can just get one tip at a time for 10 seconds, right? And you get surprised how much inspiration you can actually get in 10 seconds compared to 5 minutes. So so there's a lot of inspiration out there. Just have this mindset to see, okay, this might be a bit over the top, but maybe there are some elements we can use.
Fantastic. This has been brilliant. Thank you so much. I think these insights are very, very useful and relevant, especially because digital communication as technologies are going to stay and going to evolve even more. So thank you so much for taking the time to doing this.
It's exciting times out there, I would say, for all of us.
True.
Yeah.
True.
So thank you for having me, Anissa.
Pleasure.